Okay, welcome everybody to the LSCSB strategy board. I think most of us know each other's now, so we'll just kick straight off. It's a really long agenda and a lot on here, so I'm going to just ask presenters to keep it as short as they can and just pick out the key points of their presentation, so we leave time for questions. Otherwise, I think we're going to overrun quite considerably today. So the first item is the minutes of the previous meeting, pages 3 till 10. Is everyone happy with those minutes?
Move them, Chair.
Okay, Julie.
Thanks, Councillor Taylor. Just a quick comment from me on the community trigger element. I'm not quite sure the wording is quite correct. I know that Tim did contact Ewan with some update in terms of that, where it says that there was a judicial review. I'm not quite sure where that came from. There wasn't a judicial review. There was a complaint to the local government ombudsman, who found that we weren't signposting complainants to community trigger process or advertising it as widely as we should be. So it wasn't a judicial review.
Okay, that's fine. We'll take that out. That's fine. Yeah. Is everyone else happy with that change in the minutes?
Okay. There was just the other issue, I think, about the number of community triggers which were reported at the time of the meeting. I think Tim said there was 6, but apparently there was actually 8. So we're just going to add in a little note to say it was actually 8 at the time.
Okay, so just those 2 changes under item 39, the community trigger update. Is everyone happy with those changes? Okay.
Thanks, Ewan.
Okay. Any matters arising, which we've just dealt with? So we'll move on to item 3, the action log. Sorry, item 4, the action log. I didn't pick anything up that we need to pick up. Everything else is either done or on the item or coming to a future item. So I don't think there's anything else on here unless anyone else wants to raise anything under the action log. Okay. On to item 5, declarations of interest from anyone.
Yes, Chair, can I just declare personal interest? I'm employed by the Crown Prosecution Service, but I am not here as a representative of the Crown Prosecution Service. And the views and any opinions or comments that I may express are my own and not in relation to the CPS. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Neil. Just before we start, I've had a request from Gary B, which is item 12, the modern slavery, human trafficking, exploitation and organised immigration crime. If we can bring that item forward, he's got somewhere else to be. So if everyone's happy, we're going to take item 12 now and then we'll move back to the agenda. So is everyone happy with that? Okay, I take it Gary's here. Yeah, I can see him. Okay, over to you, Gary.
Yes, good morning. Morning, everybody. Apologies for having to bring this forward. I've a slight medical emergency that I need to go and deal with following this. So I appreciate you allowing me to bring this forward. There is a PowerPoint presentation. I can present that from my end if that helps, or if somebody that side can present it if it's within the agenda, I'll go with whatever works easiest.
If you can upload it from your end, that would be easier.
I can try. Just bear with me a second. Put all my IT skills to the test.
Yeah, it's there. Well done.
Okay, fine. I'll make an apology. I understand that I'm under a sort of a timescale of 15 minutes. I'll try and make it as succinct as I can, but there's some detail in it. I presented this to the Police and Crime Commissioner's office on Monday. It took me an hour, so I'll try and be as quick as I can and we'll fly through it. I was asked to present around modern slavery, human trafficking, but I think it's important that everybody understands where that links into the wider exploitation side of things. And organised immigration crime is something that is very much on the agenda nationally. So probably to give a bit of an overview as to how that fits into all of this. So without further ado, I'll just try and move on to the next slide. Just bear with me. A little bit of an overview of what we're going to talk about then. We're looking at historic data from 2019, 2021. I've had a problem profile, certainly in relation to the modern slavery element of this work put together. So I'll give you a little bit of an overview around statistics, what that looks like geographically across Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland, how those crimes come into us, how they're reported, what that actually looks like, and then the challenges that we face, certainly from a law enforcement perspective, on taking that forward and sort of challenges that we see forthcoming in the future. So modern slavery, human trafficking is something that we've now been talking about openly amongst the police and our relevant partners for a number of years. For about the last 2 years, the way that we in Leicestershire are set up to deal with that has changed significantly, in that I have a bespoke trafficking and slavery team within my exploitation portfolio. So that portfolio consists of not just slavery and trafficking, but child sexual exploitation, child criminal exploitation, and organised immigration crime, which I'll come on to latterly as we go through the presentation. I do find it quite shocking, and when we speak to partners, we speak to communities, that here we are in 2022 and we are still talking about human beings being trafficked for the purpose of exploitation, be it labour exploitation, sexual exploitation, and many other forms of that. And if I was going to talk to people in this forum about organ donation or organ harvesting, it is out there. It's amongst us, in that people are being moved around the world and around the UK, more importantly, for the purpose of having organs removed and harvested from them. I find it abhorrent that in 2022 we're actually talking about that area of business, but it is a difficult conversation and it needs to be spoken about, because it is happening. The two slides on there are well publicised. They sit within a lot of documentation that goes out by the National Crime Agency, the Modern Slavery Transformation Unit, and those images hopefully will be familiar with people. So it's just a little bit of an overview there. In terms of what we are actually dealing with by volume, the next slide demonstrates from April 19 through to September 21, when the problem profile was commissioned, just the volume of recorded, and we call it occurrences within the police. Generally, that is crime incidents of such. It just gives you a bit of an overview. Quite clearly, peaking at 22 in March 2021. Some of those figures will have dipped significantly because of the COVID issues that we've seen over the last couple of years, but March 21 particularly relevant because of an operation that we were running. But in terms of crimes under investigation, they're not truly reflected in these figures. These figures are more reports into the police about slavery concerns and trafficking concerns. So you could see we did sort of average around 8 or 9 of those a month that we'd investigate. It's important to understand, however, that those investigations are really complex and will take a number of officer hours to sort of investigate the allegation in its entirety and see where that goes. So a challenge there for the team in terms of the complexities of those matters that we pick up. That's actually what it looks like as far as a geographical map is concerned. Those of you that live and feature in Rutland, you'll be quite happy to look at that map and suggest that it's not so much of a problem in Rutland. I would suggest that it's as much of a problem everywhere across the county. It just isn't reported. And that's the issue that we have around people being exploited in the wider context. Again, I would like to think that we're at a situation now where most people would drive to a car wash and have some thoughts about where their £5 or their £10 is going. Experience tells me, having worked in this arena for some time and around the slavery and trafficking arena for the last 6 or 7 years in an intelligence capacity, that just about every car wash that you see on the side of the road will have an element of exploitation attached to it one way or the other. The problem that the police and partners have in relation to that is disclosures from people is notoriously difficult because of the background that they've come from, and a mistrust of law enforcement is a real challenge. I'll go on to that as we go further through the presentation. It won't surprise anybody, I'm sure, to look at that map and see the cluster of data sits around the city centre, but we have had some real significant issues that we've looked at and investigated as far out as the North Loughborough, Kegworth, Castle Donington areas, and Hinckley as well, quite prevalent in relation to slavery and trafficking offences. So it is amongst us very much, as I say, and I'll come on to that a little bit later. The issue is how it's hidden. Just to give you a little bit of an overview as to how that information comes into the police and how that's reported. If you just look in the total columns, it won't surprise you greatly. One of the higher numbers there, 79 in the last 2 years of the incidents that we investigated actually are discovered by police officers out in the community. Either we would stop a vehicle and there would be people in that vehicle that would be of concern to us. We'd visit premises and engage with people. That would be a concern to us. So the discovered by police route is relatively high, and what I'd expect. There's been a huge amount of training, certainly within our organisation, and again with partners, to understand the signs of modern slavery and exploitation. So I'm quite pleased. I'm never pleased to see a high number of crimes recorded in this area, but I am quite pleased to see those figures are discovered by the police and not reported by a third party as sort of taking the lead there. The other thing that is really relevant and goes on to what I'm saying about people being reluctant to report this themselves. If you look at the bottom two figures in the total column, 8 and 6, that's actually reported in person by a victim, and they're really, really low numbers. And again, I don't think I'm insulting anybody's intelligence. I'd like to think I'm not, by saying that a lot of the people that we find that are being exploited or trafficked come from, historically, our data would suggest Eastern Europe features really, really highly, certainly places like Vietnam, South Asia, and Albania, particularly relevant. There is a huge mistrust of law enforcement. I don't think I'm being controversial by saying it's well documented that in a number of those countries that I've just discussed, law enforcement is viewed globally as being corrupt and having some real issues, and therefore people from those backgrounds would be really, really reluctant to go and speak to the police or any kind of law enforcement agency and say they were being exploited for fear of reprisals, being targeted, or in some places even worse consequences than that. So they're the figures brought over. I don't go through every one of them in detail, but that just gives you a little bit of an overview as to where we are. Another outcome for us is disposals and how we actually get to the point of either prosecuting, not prosecuting, but in the main safeguarding victims. And as you'll see there, this table is now out of date due to some enforcement that we had last week, the week before. But in the last 2 years, it's astonishing and shocking for me. And one of my challenges is to see that we've only actually charged 4 individual cases, 4 individual perpetrators with modern slavery offences. That is not unique to Leicestershire, I can assure you. That's part of a national picture, and the challenge there is around that reluctance for people to come on board and support an investigation. If you can see at outcome number 18, investigation complete and no suspect identified, sits really high, 121 occurrences there. Again, where people will disclose to us that they've been a victim of exploitation, they're not always willing to tell us who the suspects are for, again, fear of reprisals or recrimination. But our agenda and the way that we set up to deal with this is very much by safeguarding that victim and giving them the options to get out of the situation that they find themselves in. I'll move on to the next slide, just talk very, very briefly. I'm sure many people will be familiar with the term, the National Referral Mechanism and the Single Competent Authority. That is a government body that essentially was set up in conjunction with the National Crime Agency. Anybody that we encounter that is a victim or we believe is a victim of slavery or trafficking is referred into that single point, the Single Competent Authority, and they make a decision, what's called a reasonable grounds decision, on the balance of probabilities as to whether that person is likely to be a victim of trafficking or slavery or not. What that then gives them is the opportunity to, in some cases, be housed in emergency accommodation, be moved out of the area geographically where they've been exploited, and it gives them the option to engage with law enforcement, to look at their wider safeguarding, and look at progressing their journey of being a victim to a point where they're taken out of what can be an endless chain, an endless cycle. Anybody, any relevant professional body. So I've seen today there's colleagues here from the fire service, colleagues from health, colleagues from social care. Anybody can refer into that single competent agency if we come across somebody that we think is a victim of slavery or trafficking. That whole process is due for a national review, and that's some work that's undergoing at this moment in time. But essentially, that's the body that sort of looks after people that are referred in. Exploitation I talked about at the earlier part of the meeting. I'm mindful of time, so I'm racing through this, I know, a little bit, but we've already talked about the slavery and trafficking side of stuff, but everybody will be aware of county lines drug dealing. Very much overlaps there. That is human trafficking or exploitation, generally of younger or vulnerable children, and that are involved in county lines drug dealing, but it cuts across the same thing. Another term on there, cuckooing, is something that hopefully people will have heard of and understand what cuckooing is. Essentially, that will be an individual or a group of individuals that will look at moving into an address of a vulnerable person and using that address to establish a base to deal drugs from, or to send runners out as they are dealing drugs in the community, and essentially cuckooing like the magpie does in the nest, and sort of has that whole control of the address, which often sits under the radar. That falls into clearly child criminal exploitation that we've already talked about. Other types, child sexual exploitation, very relevant still, despite of all the stuff that hit the media in recent years about grooming gangs that were very prevalent in the sort of north, sort of Sheffield, Rotherham area. I deal with this kind of business day to day. It is not isolated to geographical areas of the country, I can assure you. Sexual exploitation is prevalent and occurs in every major city in the UK without doubt. Human trafficking I've already covered, and then just very briefly, organised immigration crime, which I suspect some people may not be familiar with the term, but that is something, as I said earlier, very much on the radar. And essentially, we will have all seen on the news in recent weeks about the boats coming in from Calais and landing on the shores of Kent, and people will be familiar with the sort of clandestine lorry entry, where people are found in the back of lorries who generally will have paid a trafficker or a smuggler a substantial amount of money to enter the UK illegally. That really is, and the reason I mention that, organised immigration crime is the driver and the enabler for modern slavery. People that come to the UK in the back of a lorry do so because they don't have an entitlement to be here. They'll pay huge amounts of money, arrive in the UK, and because they have no status here, they try and remain under the radar. They'll go and look for employment, and of course the exploiters then realise that they can exploit them hugely financially, because they can't get a national insurance number, they're here illegally, and so starts that circle of exploitation. So that's sort of how that fits in. County lines, you may have seen something this morning, you may have heard something this morning on the media, national media. We frequently conduct weeks of activity around county lines drug dealing, and that sort of, we're just on the back of an enforcement week that started on the 7th. Some real significant results in Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland around taking down drug lines, suppliers, and exposing vulnerability. And as I touched on earlier, we charged 4 people last week with actually human trafficking of children and vulnerable people within Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland. So again, relevant and is occurring on our doorstep. Cuckooing, I've already basically gone across that, but I'll give you a real lifetime example of that. Operation Vane is an ongoing investigation into Loughborough, where a 13-year-old child from the West Midlands was moved across 2 counties into Loughborough, where he sat in a what we call a trap house. That essentially is a cuckooed address, dealing drugs on a large scale to the local community there. Unfortunately, last week, as I say, we managed to charge 2 individuals that are remanded and facing trial later in the year. But it's just a highlight that it happens in every large town or city in the UK. Real challenge for policing. Child criminal exploitation, again, touches right into the county lines thing. We're doing a lot of work with partners, trying to get parents and the buy-in from our communities to understand children are very much in a different place nowadays as to how they live their life socially, online, and mobile phones are a huge enabler as far as children being exploited. Very often we find parents that through no fault of their own, a lot of the time, come and talk to the police about their child being exploited, and the whole pattern and the enabler for that crime is children communicating with other children or people perceived to be other children on mobile phones, and we see it frequently where children will be coming home with new clothes, new trainers, that kind of stuff that parents can't always account for. A huge indication of people being criminally exploited, and that area of business on its own I could talk to you for hours about, but I'm mindful that we are short for time. But that's just that's something that we have had some challenges dealing with in the last couple of years. I have a bespoke team that are in their infancy of being set up. I've got staff arriving next week to really try and make a difference around how we deal with child criminal exploitation. It's a huge threat for us. And then organised immigration crime, again, I've already touched on that. Some of the differences up there about the difference between smuggling and trafficking. We will have heard the phrase human trafficking on a number of occasions, but where people smuggling is different, as I've already alluded to, that's a crime against the state, and it's where willing people pay considerable amounts of money, and generally that's in excess of £20,000 at this moment in time to be facilitated into the UK. And again, people will be given false promises. The reality of it, a lot of the time, people will end up being exploited when they actually get here. Operation Melrose, I'm sure everybody will be aware of. This is the incident down in Grays in Essex, where the refrigerated lorry was found, and 39 people were found to be dead in the back of that. If you just have a look at that slide, that gives you a real grim overview, I think, of actually the impact, not just locally, but sort of nationally across that. £3.5 million, or in excess of £3.5 million. That investigation's cost so far to the public purse, and if you look at the amount of officers that were employed on that at one point, that is significant. That is almost every operational police officer in this county, in sort of overview as to what that looks like. I've put at the bottom there, it can happen anywhere. We're doing a lot of training with our partners to recognise the signs and to look at where we sit geographically. Funnily enough, Leicestershire sits almost at the perfect distance for a lorry driver to get off a ferry in Dover or Folkestone and then drive before they have to take their required lawful break. It's around about 3.5-4 hours. So we see quite a lot of this at Leicester Forest East Services. It's an issue for us there, as it is up at Castle Donington at the services there just at the airport. So some significant impact for us in Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland. And again, partners out at the east of the county, the A1, again, a heavy transport route through there. So features just about everywhere. I appreciate I think I may have slightly overran. It's a real whistle stop, as I say, about 3 minutes over, but I'm happy to take any questions, or I'm happy to speak to anybody who has an interest in looking at this in a lot more detail outside of this meeting. If there are any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them.
Thanks, Gary. Just one question in the chat before I go to Les about advertising the car wash scenario that you just said. You know, probably a lot of people are not aware of that, so it's just probably communication and getting public awareness raised, I suppose, as much as you can about what's likely to be the people that are working at these car washes. So maybe that's something you can just take away and have a look into.
Yeah, there's some work about to fall nationally in relation to that, and regionally there's a safer car wash scheme being launched. Doesn't necessarily sit with police, but a lot of partners, certainly from the Environment Agency, from as far as the hidden economy team within the Inland Revenue, those kind of people are doing spontaneous visits all the time, and we're actually going out and trying to engage with car washes, and you will find that there will be a national and a regionally focused advertising campaign on billboards and things like that, talking about the safer car wash scheme. So that is something that's being looked at.
Okay, Les.
Thanks, Joe. Gary, thank you for that. I'm sure a lot of us are not surprised by the stats that you've produced, and indeed the commentary behind those stats. As a ballpark figure, I presume that you have a guesstimate of the stats that you've produced. Must be known figures, known numbers, known reports, identified. What's the unknown percentage? Have you got a ballpark sort of guesstimate? Because you must have one somewhere.
So the figures that are within the problem profile that we've just had produced look at 2 years worth of crime data. they will be much higher, much more significant than that. And again, you know, I did an awful lot of work in a previous role trying to get into Eastern European communities, Polish communities, Romanian communities. And as I alluded to in this, the problem is trying to get that engagement from communities that have a huge mistrust of law enforcement and any other kind of legal body. It'd be really difficult for me to say, and I don't think it'd be fair to pluck a ballpark figure. All I ever say to people in this area of business is the problem is much wider than any of us, I think, are prepared to recognise.
That'll do me. Thank you, Gary. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, David.
Hi, Gary. It's David from Melton Borough Council. I'm the community lead there. Obviously, very interesting presentation, but for training into sort of areas of the human trafficking and things of that nature, is anything available that the police can deliver to officers at local authority level, so when they go out they know what they're looking for and things of that nature?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we've just been in the process of rolling out training to our sort of local neighbourhood policing teams. If you want to drop me an email separately, and I'll invite this to anybody, we are more than happy to come and engage with partners that are on the ground and have that sort of operational footprint, or to try and just upskill people's understanding of the signs to look for. We're more than happy to roll that out as a team.
Brilliant, thank you.
Gary, just part of that, I did try to sort of get some training for this board, and it kind of fell away for not much interest. So obviously this is of interest to people, so maybe we can pick up some training for members here, and this might be one of the subjects. So I'll leave that with you, and to just see if we can get a date in the diary for members to have some training that they can then take back to their authorities. So we'll pick that up with you if that's okay. Yes,
absolutely.
Okay, Neil.
Thanks, Dan. Thank you, Gareth, for the presentation. I know from my day job about the references to the single competent authority when prosecuting individuals who are raising the defence of modern day slavery. And I'm finding that the time for determinations by the SCA is getting longer and longer. Now, I appreciate there's going to be additional resources, and you did touch upon the possibility of a further review going on, but have you any extra information which can indicate that nationally government is addressing this issue and that the growing backlog of references is going to be cut into? Thanks.
Thanks for your question, Neil. I've deliberately left Section 45 of the Modern Slavery Act out of this presentation because that in itself is 3 hours worth of discussion. That is a defence that people can raise for the wider panel if you don't understand that they've been a victim of trafficking and slavery, and we will often use that where we're trying to prosecute offences. The Police and Crime Commissioner was very interested in this area of business when I spoke to them on Monday. It is subject to national review. In terms of reasonable grounds decisions, Neil, I think that was the question that you're asking. That generally comes back on the balance of probabilities within a couple of weeks. The conclusive grounds decision, which is the single competent authority coming to exactly what that is, a conclusive grounds decision as to whether the person was subject to slavery or not, unfortunately, is taking somewhere between 9 and 12 months to come to, and that is a huge challenge nationally.
Okay. Well, thanks very much, Gary, and we'll let you go and sort out your other half, and hope everything's okay there. So thank you very much, and hopefully we can arrange some training for the panel on this subject a bit wider. Gives us more time to have a discussion about that. So we'll let you go. Thanks very much for coming.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Okay, we'll go back to item 6 now. Hopefully Gary's screen will go when he leaves. Item 6 now, back onto the agenda, the Strategic Partnership Board. I think Jane's taking us through this.
Apologies, Chair. Jane's had to go off to chair another meeting, so because Gary came in first, she had to leave. So I'm going to pick it up. So it probably won't be as in depth as perhaps Jane, but if I can't answer any questions, I know David Pete's on the call. So hopefully David, CEO of the Police and Crime Commissioner's Office, will be able to assist me as well. So if I just share my screen quickly. Can we all see that?
Yeah, that's come up, Gadget.
Perfect. Okay, so we were just going to, Jane was going to give you an overview of the Strategic Partnership Board review and the new priorities for 2022-23. Before I start, to say that built into this review is a strong relationship that the SPB is planning to have going forward with community safety partnerships and this board, the LSESB. So in terms of the core purpose of the SPB, it's to provide system leadership. So really to focus on those areas of business which require an LLR-wide cross-sector, so multi-agency response. And responsible for discharging shared legal duties. So what we've done through this work is really look at what those statutory duties are. We've just had the Domestic Abuse Partnership Board before this meeting, so things like that, the forthcoming serious violence duty, and lots of other strategies such as a substance misuse strategy, harm to hope. There's numerous ones that fit into this agenda. So the SPB will be leading those. The 2022 priority, looking at reducing violence and vulnerability as kind of the umbrella priority and everything fitting under there. And we're embracing the World Health Organized definition around that. I can circulate the 2 slides that I'm going to present with the minutes. So you'll have a copy of these. And the priority focus being domestic abuse, sexual violence and public place violence. And when looking at those, we will also be looking at the risk and protective factors. So, for example, when looking at domestic abuse, within that we'll be looking at what happens when children are victims of domestic abuse and then go on to have lower chances within the criminal justice system, becoming violent themselves, etc. So the way we've looked at it is that a lot of the work across the partnership fits into this priority focus. We're taking on a public health approach to this work, so using data and insights, being population focused, working with and for communities. So we talk about authentic voice and voice work and really working with communities on how we shape this going forward. Looking at short and long-term solutions, so the preventative space. It will all be evidence-based and it will be across the whole system, as I mentioned earlier. So in terms of the delivery structure, Strategic Partnership Board chaired by Rupert Matthews, our Police and Crime Commissioner, and then under that will be the SPB Executive, which will be chaired by Jane Moore going forward. The approach is going to be one of a life course approach. So as I said earlier, we'll be looking right through from prevention through to disruption. So that will take that life course approach as on that second arrow there. 3 sub-boards have been set up. So we have now identified chairs for all 3 of them. Across the partnership, so we've got chairs from police, from social care, city, Rutland and county are within that structure as chairs or vice chairs. So it's really collaborative in terms of the delivery of it. The first board is prevention and early intervention. So that's the kind of early years part, and that's to prevent the early onset of violence through strengthening protective factors and ensuring relevant strategies are targeted at the population most at risk. And then there's examples of business there. So reducing the impact of known childhood trauma, so parental conflict, domestic abuse, etc. And there's a number through there onto trauma-informed work that we've been speaking about quite a lot over the last year or so. The second one is Adolescent Safety and Diversion Board, so to prevent and reduce involvement in violence through safeguarding, early intervention and diversion. So this fits into really the presentation we've just heard, certainly in terms of the slide around young people and children and young people missing, child criminal exploitation, etc. And then the final one is Adult Vulnerability and the Offending Board, so MAPA. So that's preventing the recurrence of violence through criminal justice responses. So that's as much as I was going to present on that. So happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Gergie. It looks a lot cleaner, a lot more focused than it was before, because I don't think I ever really understood the SPB before. So for me, that's a lot clearer about the focus of the work and how that relates for us and down to the CSP. So much clearer. So yeah, it'd be good to share those slides afterwards. Is there any questions or comments from anybody regarding that? Who's the chairs of the 3 boards? Do you know, Gurjit? Or
I do. So we've got the director of social care in the city, and then our director as vice chair for the first board, the children's one. We've got, I think it's David Sandel. David, are you on the David P, are you on the call? Oh, Bob's on. Bob, are you the chair of the 3rd one?
I am, and I think David Sandel is the chair of the middle one.
All right, brilliant. Okay, yeah. Really good. Okay, brilliant. Yeah, no, that'd be good. And we get updates coming here of the work and impact and stuff again. Yeah. Okay. Brilliant.
Yeah. And as I say, really keen to link in with this board and with the community safety partnership. So I'm currently leading a review of the senior officer group work. So that will feed into now the SPB review, and then that will filter through. I know the CSPs are currently looking at reviewing strategies and plans. So hopefully this work will inform some of that as well.
Okay, brilliant. Any questions or comments from anybody? Okay. And I will apologise for Jane for making her disappear. Okay, lovely. Thanks for stepping in, Gurjit. Okay, we'll go on to item 7, which is the community safety agreement review. Rick?
Thank you, Chair. The paper's been circulated, and as the board will know, the community safety agreement is a statutory document that sets out shared priorities across partners. The current format and update process for the community safety agreement has been previously agreed by the board. There is a requirement, however, for the CSA to be reviewed annually to ensure it remains relevant, and to comply with that review requirement, the report has been circulated, and also it's intended to advise of recent changes to that document and outline some anticipated updates to the document in the coming months. The current document makeup, it's made up as a PDF document, but also appears online on a web page. It's a single page format with hyperlinks to other materials. So with those hyperlinks, it becomes quite a comprehensive document. The update that is planned to the document has been highlighted in the report itself, but the most significant anticipated changes in the coming months will be, as Gurjit just mentioned, changes to partnership strategies, and also it needs to incorporate the police and crime plan and also the SPB priorities as they're formed. And the request to the board today is to note the contents of the report, but also to approve the continued use of the community safety agreement in its current format.
Thanks, Rick. Yeah, no, I had to flick through a lot of the links and stuff. Yeah, no, some really good stuff on there. So yeah, I've got no issues with it. Has anyone else got any comments or issues they want to raise? No, I'll take that it's all okay. So yeah, that's fine with us, Rick.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, we'll move on to item 8, which is the Office of Police and Crime Commissioner update. Hi, David, we've got your report here. So if you just want to highlight some key items on it.
Hi, yeah, thank you, Chair, and hello everybody who I've not met so far. I'm David Peat. I'm the new Chief Exec here in the PCC's office. As said, you should have had the report. I've been in post since the beginning of January this year and come with significant experience working in police and crime commissioners' offices, but also around the community safety agenda. Kind of big bits to or kind of highlights to raise. The police and crime plan has now been produced. As Rick has alluded to, there are statutory responsibilities that the plan has due regard to community safety plans, and likewise community safety plans have due regard to the police and crime plan. Paragraph 7 of the report, there are the 12 main kind of strategic areas and strategic kind of headline priorities within the plan. We are currently pulling together the delivery plan and the key performance indicators for that delivery. Some of that will include delivery through some of the work that we're doing in partnership with some of the people sat around the virtual table today. Other things just to kind of quickly highlight, we are in the process of reviewing our funding arrangements for supporting community safety partnerships. To give some people some reassurance, they should have received notification now that the 2022-23 allocations are the same as they were last year. We are looking to engage with our CSP partners over the coming 6 months, so kind of pre-September, I guess. And we'll look to pull together a new approach to funding and supporting community safety partnerships. The good news that's in there is we are hoping that we may well be able to look at multi-year settlements or multi-year funding agreements, which hopefully community safety partners will find useful in terms of their strategic planning. The other kind of key issue will be a much greater link between the work that CSPs are delivering using this funding and the police and crime plan. But hopefully there is so much of that kind of Venn diagram crossover between our plans and your plans that shouldn't be difficult. And then the final thing to talk about is today actually is Chief Constable Simon Cole's last day as Chief Constable for Leicestershire Police. We are in the process of building the recruitment process. As you would imagine, it is fairly robust and it is fairly heavily regulated. And there are a number of you I see around the virtual table who will have a role in it in relation to you sit on the police and crime panel, and the police and crime panel have a role as part of the process. Hopefully, we'll be kicking the recruitment off in the next few weeks, just kind of finalising a few details. And in the meantime, Deputy Chief Constable Rob Nixon is acting up into the role as temporary Chief Constable. So that's a very whistle-stop tour through the report. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to try and answer them.
Thanks, David. Any questions or comments from anyone for David? I'm sure the CSPs will welcome a multi-year settlement, as we all do whenever we get any funding. It's much helpful for 2 or 3 years knowing what you're going to get rather than a day-to-day budget. So any other questions for David? No? Okay, lovely. Thanks, David. Okay, on to item 9, which is the LSCSB performance update. Back to you, Rick.
Thank you, Chair. A report's been circulated for Q3 performance, and it includes the latest link to the current performance dashboard, which contains the data underpinning the report. It's just a reminder that the report focuses on broad county-wide trends, so performance in particular localities may differ from the broad outline that's within the report. If I was to summarise the report, most of the crime categories remain stable, apart from violence with injury, which is unfortunately something that I've reported on for the several reports to this board. The youth offending data, which had not changed during the last report, has now been updated and is showing quite positive trends. The only other thing that I would sort of highlight from within the report is the MARAC data. The repeat referral rates from the last report were showing favourable trend. You'll remember that we were at 51% at its height. We're now down to 38%, which is below the safe lives threshold of 40%. So we were below that now. That's broadly the report summary. I can go through in more detail, but obviously the performance report has been circulated. Happy to take any questions.
Rick, just one point for me about the MARAC. Is there anything in particular that we've seen, you know, that those repeat referrals drop? Is there anything that we've done differently to engineer that, or is it just kind of happened?
Well, certainly there's been a great deal of work done by MARAC, and we had a quite a detailed presentation from the MARAC manager last year, which I can ask him to come along again, but he'll be able to detail that work. But certainly there's been a great deal. We've now got daily MARACs, and there's a great deal of work to ensure that repeat referrals. You'll recall that there was a change in definition for MARACs, that what a repeat actually constituted, that accounted for that surge. But I can certainly get him to come to the meeting and give that give certainly more detailed description of what's actually gone on.
Yeah, I think that'd be useful, because they were sort of, when they came last time, they were just sort of saying, you know, we don't think we're ever going to hit it, and we obviously have now, so that's really good news. But I'll be keen to understand a bit more about how we've managed to get to that point, and obviously now we're there, we need to continue it, don't we? So I think it might be good to get them back. Gurjit.
Thank you, Chair. Just to add to that, the repeat referrals are down. What has gone up are new referrals, and these are referrals that were previously unknown to any agency. And we think COVID has had an influence on that. I think it would be useful to put MARAC on the next agenda. There's been a MARAC review underway at the moment, which partners have paid to have that done. So by the next meeting, we should have the findings of that review. So it'd be good to bring those as well, to have a look at how we can influence what's come out of that review and what the recommendations are.
Yeah, no, that'd be good to get that on the agenda. Any other questions or comments from anyone? No? Okay, lovely. Thanks ever so much, Rick. Okay, we'll move on to item 10 now, which is the Antisocial Behaviour System Governance and Coordination Officer. This is a report by Charlotte. Is Charlotte on here?
Oh, maybe she's not. Do you want to move on to the next agenda item, and I'll find out, Chair?
Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll move on to item 11, so the Leicestershire Fire and Rescue Service update. So, Mick, I can see you're there.
Thank you very much, Chair. Made sure I turned off the mic, or switched the mic on, so I didn't talk with no noise coming out. Thank you. It's my first opportunity, I guess, to give you an update in terms of what the service does in relation to community safety. And I know that you've got the report in front of you, and I think it's just worthwhile maybe giving you an update or remind you that we do have a specific community safety team that looks at both building safety from a protection perspective, but also the community safety element of looking after people, which is our prevention point of view. There are some key things that you'll see within this, and I first have to also explain, sorry, paragraph 3, it's an error on my behalf, and I would be clearly remiss of me if I didn't share it. The Fire Safety Reform Order 2005 is the correct year, and that relates to our responsibility to ensure that buildings are safe from a fire safety perspective. So when we say that, we're talking about fire doors being in the correct place and they work, emergency lighting, fire alarm systems are suitable, and other things like that within the built environment. So my apologies, that's my error. Always want to put my hand up. So what have we done then in the since 2020-21? If you don't know, and again, apologies because I'm not sure what level of input that you've had in the past, we do a range of services from a prevention point of view. The key one, I think, for us is to actually target those that are vulnerable from fire, visit them in their homes and do a tailored fit-for-purpose fire safety check, which looks at the way that they live, whether they're smokers, use alcohol, their cooking arrangements, heating the building as well. But we've developed now a safety check, which also incorporates their own well-being. So it's now referred to as a home safety check. So once we're quite satisfied from a fire safety perspective that we've put things into place, we also look at the potential for falls, trips and slips. We look at whether they've got other elements, whether dementia, and there's a whole range of social services that we look for from a view then of referring through to the right agencies. Productivity has been a big thing in the last year, and I know, and I also have to say, my colleagues from the police have put me to shame. The next time there's an update, there'll be a glossy presentation that will give you some infographics, and it'll be really clear to pick out. So that's the beauty of collaboration for me. So apologies for the text. But we've done a lot more in the last few years. It's all detailed within the report. But I think the key thing that we're certainly proud of is the work following the Grenfell, and we've had quite a number of influences as a result of that tragic incident that you'll remember. And we've had to do a risk-based inspection programme, which looks at all of the high-rise buildings within Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland. Now, most of them, as you can imagine, are in Leicester itself. We've got one or two that are outside in the county areas. But we've done phenomenal work to make sure that they're all within the arrangements that should be there under the regulatory reform order. Of course, cladding has been an issue, as you can imagine, since the Grenfell incident. So our productivity levels have been absolutely fantastic. Really proud of those over the last year. Away from the buildings, but going back as well to maybe the prevention things that you may not be aware of, we do run a cadet scheme where we highlight people that are possibly involved in fire, or we think that they need some additional support. We do a number of those schemes over a period of a few weeks at different locations around the county. Looking to try and do more of those this year as we move forward. But we're also responsible for delivering road safety input too. I think under the Road Safety Partnership, our remit is looking at younger drivers, and we do that through trying to be immersive with them, give them some great advice, some great demonstrations of what it feels like to be involved in a car collision. And we've just took delivery, let's say just not too long ago, of the Hazard Express vehicle, which is an interactive virtual reality 4D type immersive atmosphere that talks about road safety matters, not only from a driving perspective, but also cyclists, motorcyclists and horses, which is going down really well from a technological point of view. And I'm really looking forward to be able to getting out there now with COVID rules relaxing to get as many young adults through that as possible. So what are we doing this year? I guess the key things from a partnership point of view, and it's listed in the report, I can't stress enough that we have a relatively small team compared to others. And part of my ambition is to try and get more and more support from partners in relation to be able to do some of the things that we do yourselves. Really fascinated earlier on in the story about domestic abuse and we're putting people into refuge. And you'll have to excuse me because I've only been in here a few months in this post, but do we do enough from a viewpoint of making sure that the fire safety measures within properties and within people's minds is correct when they're moving from one building to another? So it's about partnership activity to understand the role that you guys can play from a view of thinking about fire safety. And we're able to train team members, which we've done successfully in different partnerships over the county over recent years, so that you can actually carry out that home fire safety check whilst you're doing other checks with individuals within buildings. So that's one of the things that I'm reaching out for a little bit today to explore potentials to move forward. I think I put some recommendations in the for the board. Obviously, the key aspect was to consider how you could promote or support the activities that we're involved with from a prevention and protection point of view. And I'm happy to have conversations offline from a viewpoint that establish what we do and does it work, because obviously part of being involved is it effective, and do we have any evaluation tools in there to be able to clarify that, but also to explore new avenues, which I'm always mindful to do, especially when there's partnership money being available to use to enable our resources to grow. I hope that's a bit of a whistle-stop tour in line with the chair's instruction, I think, at the beginning of the meeting, but I'm really happy to take any questions or any points.
Thanks, Mick and Dee. Please don't apologise for not having a glossy PowerPoint. That's no problem at all. Just a couple of points from me about obviously the high-rise buildings where you mentioned there under paragraph 13. Was there any follow-up work that was done once all those inspections were done? Have we got sort of any night watching and stuff like that within the county or not? Or is it mainly just in the city? No,
I think, and I can't give you an update in terms of every building that we've got individual activity happening at the moment. But what I can assure you with is that any time that we've been into a property where we think there are issues from an enforcement point of view, not only is it the legislative aspect that we have to be mindful of in terms of whether or not it's safe for people to reside there, we also take into account the impact on the individuals and councils and the like in relation to saying, sorry, you're going to have to move out. The city provide most of our high-rise buildings, as I say, but it doesn't mean that we don't inspect non-high-rise buildings as part of our risk-based inspection programme. Commercial splits, as we call them, where you've got a shop downstairs and the accommodation upstairs, is one of our most prolific areas where we find enforcement challenges. And we work from an incremental perspective of warn for, sorry, educate. We then warn, and then obviously we have to take the necessary action after that. So it is incremental and very supportive. And one of the things maybe I did gloss over, which I should have given it more airtime, is that we've done a number of events, both in person and online, where we brought the responsible people under the regulatory reform order together to tell them what their expectations are, what they need to be looking out for before we come and visit. So they're in a much better position to get things in place so that there's less time spent during the inspection. They know what to actually deliver from an advice point of view to us when we go and check. And that's been really, really well received and positive. With in fact, the last virtual meeting we had over 100 attendees, which is brilliant from our point of view.
Okay, brilliant. And just one other point from me before I go to Les. Obviously, you mentioned there that if you go and do a fire check and then you see other health or dementia or other risk and stuff like that, you'll do referrals onto other organisations. I just wondered, do you get many referrals sort of back the other way from council visits where we've gone to check the boiler, and do you get anything like that coming that way through visits that sort of partners do?
Yeah, we do, which is really positive. And again, I'd encourage more of that to ensure that within your arenas that that those referrals are happening when they should. But most of our home fire safety checks are from partner referrals, which is positive. We have our own targeting process to reduce risk, if you like, for the most vulnerable. And then sadly the final part of that is we do what we call a post-incident response when we've had an incident in a particular area. And sadly, many of you may be aware of a fire fatality yesterday or the day before in Hinckley. So sensitively, we will look at the community, give reassurance to those associated or adjacent properties, and then carry out a risk-based approach on the properties that we think we need to give more, advice to.
Okay, that's good to hear. It works both ways, because what we want to do is one person visiting the property and they're informing everyone else of any other risks within that property that they visited. We don't need multiple people visiting, do we? So that's really good to hear. Les.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Mick, so the partnership referral side of it, do you work with pick up referrals from Lightbulb?
Yes, we do.
Cool,
yeah.
Perfect. That's great. That's what I wanted to hear. And the second one is a bit of a cheeky I've put a cheeky question in the chat, but actually I think it's really important. This immersive driving experience that you have, I'm assuming it's a static piece of kit. Yeah. Is there an opportunity for either us, any of us who are interested, to actually have a look at it, or B, have you got a video that at some point you could show us as to what it is? It is critically important. We do know that the number of high-speed impacts increased through COVID lockdown, and we do know that it tends to be a younger generation. So I just think it'd be really interesting because, I have a part background in virtual reality, so I'd be really interested to learn about it.
You'll have to go to one of their events, Les. Go to one of their open days where they visited village fates and stuff like that. I've done the car crash one into a tractor, and that's pretty freaky. Yeah, so
as long as I've got a ticket that I can play with it, experience it, that would be great. But I just think it'd be really interesting to see what it is.
Yeah, what would be really helpful, if I can, Chair, is signpost you to our website. Please visit Leicestershire Fire. You'll find it in your search engine of choice. And if you I think across the banners, it's called Hazard Express. If you search for that as well, it'll give you an update, and there is some really good footage of what it does, how it reduces, or how we educate others to reduce their risk when on the road. So please make every effort to familiarise yourself with it if you aren't already.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks. Any other questions for Mick from anyone? Neil.
Hi, Mick. Thanks very much for the report. Later on in this agenda, we're going to have an update on the new prison at Glenparva. I was just wondering about the engagement that the fire service does have with regard to the construction materials in respect of the new prison, as well as the sort of general protection for the prisoners in respect to fire safety. Can you give us any sort of brief outline as to the engagement that the fire service does have?
Yeah, thank you. So it's a really good question. we have ongoing engagement with all of the prisons within LLR at the moment, and it's really reassuring to know that there are challenges with prisons. I can't deny that from a viewpoint of deliberate fires within cells, but they all are equipped with misting systems, which allows the staff at the prison to be able to extinguish the fire quickly and ultimately remove said individual from the cell from a safety perspective. As you can also appreciate within a prison environment, the design and fit and the fixtures are all designed to be robust, you know, from a vandalism perspective, where more harm can be achieved, and of course costs for the prison authority in that respect. And part of the construction design is very much helpful from a fire safety perspective, by the very nature of the fact that certainly alarms and safe exit routes and so on are always going to be well equipped. But in terms of the actual construction of the building itself on the outward side, we don't at this stage have any responsibility or requirement to engage with developers over what that looks like. But I think moving forward, depending on the size of the builds, that's certainly part of the outcomes of the Grenfell inquiry. There's going to be a new gateway process which is in development at the moment, which will see a greater engagement the fire and rescue service with developers when they're looking to erect new buildings.
Okay, thanks, Mick.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thanks, Mick.
Okay, got no other questions for you, Mick. Thank you very much for that. Really interesting, and I'm sure we'll all be heading to your website after this to have a go at that Hazard Express to see what that looks like. Okay, we'll go back to item 10 now. I can see Charlotte's joined us. Welcome, Charlotte. Obviously we've got your report and obviously the detailed slides and presentation that you did to us at the last meeting, so I'm just keen to hear what updates you've got from your work you've been doing. So over to you, Charlotte.
Thank you. Yeah, the work so far is going really well. Engagement with all the partners is really positive, and it's quite established now in the work that's going on. I'll just sort of go over the notable developments and challenges. We're currently running some bite-sized training for all staff that use Sentinel at the moment, and that take-up's been really positive, and the feedback's been really good as well. They're 30-minute bite-sized training sessions, and they change once a week time-wise, but there's a different session every 4 weeks over a period of, I think we've got 3 months worth of sessions booked up. So lots of staff joining that bite-sized training across all partners, which is really positive. The case management module, which is the module to manage cases, larger base cases, is still undergoing some physical changes at the moment. They're being implemented between myself and Vantage, and then hopefully late April we should have that up and running for Charnwood to test for their community triggers for us, which is a good thing. It's nice to know that Charnwood have volunteered for us, so that's really good. So hopefully the outcome of the testing will be really positive. We've got the deduplication work, which is the reducing the amount of duplicate data we have within the system, and each partner is undertaking their own deduplication processes. That is got a deadline now to be finished by the end of this month, ready for the review, retain and delete module, which is the module to delete any data from the system that is over 6 years old, in line with the GDPR and data protection. That's the module's due to be designed and created in the very near future, but we have to get the deduplication work finished ready for that. So if I could just reiterate to all partners, the deadline is the end of March. The issues or partnership work, everything's working really well actually. I haven't come across many issues. The risks identified within the slides at my previous presentation have been greatly received by a lot of people. I'm working individually with different partners, local authorities, to address any concerns about the way that data is coming over into the system. So I thank everybody for their engagement with that. And that's basically it for me. Thank you, Chair. Any questions?
Thanks, Charlotte. I just want to pick up that bit about community triggers. I just wonder what work's ongoing, because I know Charnwood's had a huge spike, haven't they? And that's probably come from the LGO complaint that went through that. And we haven't seen that across other districts. So I just really want to know, you know, if we delved a bit deeper into that as to why Charnwood have had that and why other areas haven't, you know, because at the end of the day, we don't want any community triggers, are we? Because that's a failure in the system of supporting that victim. So I just wonder if you know, Charnwood have been promoting it a lot more due to their LGO advice and other districts haven't.
Chair,
or,
just before Charlotte answers, because I've got a report from our Becca Holcroft at Blaby, and we've had 3 community triggers in 2 weeks, and it's the highest ever.
Right, so it's just kind of like the outlying, isn't it? It just seems to have we got any evidence about what's happened and why we've suddenly got this, you know, a huge amount in Charnwood and then not in others? So
I think it's quite an interesting an interesting point, because I know up until I think it was last year before, there was a lot of work done by ASB Help, which is the national help that did lots of training with local authorities around community triggers. That preempted the work that was done across the partnership around creating an LLR-wide community trigger policy. So me and Gurjit have discussed it, and I've been and looked at all the other local authorities' websites. They are pretty consistent across the board, actually. Everybody is saying the same thing and publicising all their results, etc., as what was agreed within the policy. So from a customer's perspective, actually visually it looks the same. I can't comment on whether people are physically, you know, encouraging people to go down the community trigger route, but I think a lot of publicity has been done over the last 2 years around community triggers, specifically from ASB Help. There's been lots of publications that they've released, so I do wonder whether a lot of that's kind of got out into the community, and as a result of that, that is starting to see, if Blaby is starting to see an increase as well. I think that we all hopefully will see an increase, because it's not a bad thing to a community trigger. It's a good way for us to learn from what we're doing well and what we're not doing so well. But I do wonder if there are discrepancies within the working that isn't apparent. But from a customer's perspective, I looked across the board that it's pretty consistent across most partners. So I think if I was a new customer wanting to know how to get that help, it's pretty clear to see across the websites for each organisation how that is done.
Okay.
I can't comment massively, unfortunately, Chair, but I think
just an interesting as well. We've seen, Julie, have you got any great experience about why? Have we managed to dig down a bit or not?
I wish it's slow down. We've already got quite a few in Charnwood, but we've obviously seen another spike. I think there's a few things. We have been proactively advertising, and I know that all the websites look the same. On the bottom of our emails now, we at Charnwood have got, following the LGO's findings, that we have got a statement which signposts people to the case review. I know that we have obviously done member training in Charnwood, where community triggers was part of that. And there was a panorama programme about 4 weeks ago, that was around community triggers. And I think that might have accounted for the recent local spike, because even though we get them consistently coming in, we've seen a further spike. And I think, interestingly, I think at least 1 or 2 of ours in the past few weeks has come in via Victim First, or been signposted via there. So I think they're coming in via different routes. But yeah, the panorama programme did, whoever saw that would have raised the profile of them.
Okay. And I suppose it's just picking up the learning from that, isn't it? Have you done any sort of the reasons why those community triggers, sort of what's been the issue that's prompted the community triggers? Because that's really good learning that we can share across the partnerships, if you've managed to pick up any themes or where the system might be letting victims down.
Yeah, we did take a paper to CSP about the common themes and presented that to partners. We have had a meeting recently with Charlotte, Gurjit and the police to talk about those themes and to talk about what we can do from a collective learning perspective. From a Borough Council perspective, as part of our ASB, we've tried to embed the learning from what we found in terms of community triggers to put some of the process things correct. So I'm hoping those things won't disappear, but the threshold is quite low in terms of numbers of complaints to be received from a national perspective, and I know that's been identified as well, and we are at the maximum, although the maximum's not that high in relative terms. So yeah, we have taken some of that learning on board.
Okay, Gurjit.
Yes, Chair. Just to say, what we will do across the partnership going forward is there's an ASB delivery group, and what we'll do is, because of the rise across Blaby as well, and I'm sure some others potentially will see some rise, we will take that learning, we'll look at those triggers and take what comes out of those reviews, and we'll discuss it at that delivery group at kind of operational level to see if there is anything we can do across the partnership. Is it something that, you know, is it how we're responding to ASB, or is it because things like, as Julie said, the comms on national television? But we'll take that back and we'll have a look and we'll bring a report back.
Okay, thanks. Charlotte?
I just wanted to add that we are embedding the community trigger process within Sentinel as part of the case management module system, and actually within the ASB reporting system, so that it's easier to identify where somebody's already hitting that trigger if they've not already put a community trigger request in, that officers are aware then that they can notify that individual. So we are already looking to embed that. And also actually, I think to make the system more robust in identifying things quicker, we're reviewing all the global documents actually, Julie, so it'd be really useful if we could see a copy of sort of the statement that you're putting at the emails and stuff, and we can look to put that at the bottom of letters as a standardized item if that's something that people think would be really useful, because we are reviewing all global documents. So I'm happy to look at that.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, any other questions on Charlotte's report? Okay, brilliant, thank you. Okay, so we'll move back now to item 13, which is the counter-terrorism local profiles. And is Andy online? Oh yeah, there you are. Okay, over to you, Andy.
Thanks, Chair. Morning, everybody. Just to introduce myself, Andy Godby. I'm the regional sergeant on the Prevent team. So I cover the East Mids region. I'm also joined by Joanna Elliott, who's just taken over from me as the Leicester Police Sergeant. So I don't know whether Joe's joined, has she?
Yes,
Joe?
I have joined. Yeah, good morning, everybody.
Okay, so I'll give you a brief input. I believe it's 15 minutes. Am I correct, Chair? If I can keep to 15.
We're doing all right on the agenda, so you should be okay. Yeah.
Lovely. Okay, so I'll give you an overview of everything so far. So just for everybody's information, the team is based at Spinney Hill Police Station, small police team. Think of us as like the front line part of Prevent, in the fact that we're dealing with the individuals that have been referred into us. Providing them, making sure that support is put in place as soon as possible. We are made up of, there's 2 civilian officers, and there are 4 police officers that we've got on the team. A couple of vacancies as well coming up, people moving on. But yeah, very busy team. I'm going to go through a document. I'm not going to put it on screen because it seems to slow I was going to put a PowerPoint up, but it seems to affect my signal. So I'm just going to go through the document. You'll have to put it with my face for now, so I do apologise for that. Just bear with me. So the information I'm going to give you now is based on like an overview of the counter-terrorism local profile document, which is basically published every year around about December, January time. It's an understanding of the threats, vulnerabilities and risks relating to terrorism and violent extremism in the local area. So it's very much geared towards what people's perception of the threats are, what the actual threats are, the investigations that are going on around the local areas, so Leicester and Leicestershire and Rutland. It's based, a lot of it's based on the questionnaire that's sent out to people to get people's opinions, etc., across the board, local partners, etc., public, and all of that information is put together and it's included within the document itself. So from that, we basically establish priorities for the coming year, and those priorities allow us to then look at what sort of inputs we need to be giving, what sort of engagement we need to be carrying out, what sort of reassurance we need to be giving to communities, and that's based on the current threats, etc., in the local area. So the document was published in January, so it's still relatively recent, and the threats that have been, the priorities that have been established for this year are Islamist terrorism, extreme right-wing terrorism, online extremism, self-initiated terrorists, which we abbreviate to SITs, extremist travel, prison radicalisation and releases. If anyone's got any questions, by the way, please feel free to ask at the end, and I'll try and answer those questions for you. So national events and the ongoing COVID pandemic, although things have quietened down somewhat, have impacted on the local threat from terrorism and violent extremism. Lockdowns have increased periods of isolation as well as the use of the internet. So clearly, the online extremism part is a big concern in the fact that people of all ages have had a lot of time, or a lot more time now, to be online, to be looking at unhealthy things, where progressing their extreme views, etc. And as a result of not being seen by other people, they have been allowed to flourish, if you like, to develop these views. And it's only now that we're getting the referrals coming in a lot more frequently, where people have, showing that they've got these extreme views, and we potentially need to be put some sort of support in place as quickly as possible. Online propaganda and extremist media have been used to radicalise and recruit individuals into both the extreme Islamist and extreme right-wing terrorist spaces. And locally, the two ideologies have been highlighted as CTLP priorities. It's established that the assessed that the greatest threat in both ideologies comes from inspired rather than directed individuals. These are categorised as self-initiated terrorists. So basically what we're saying is that these are people who have have developed their views online or by other means, and they're not acting on the instructions of other people. They're not belonging to certain groups, but because they feel that what they need to do is from a self-belief point of view, they take it upon themselves to go out and carry out terrorist attacks. And the 4 national attacks that we've had recently, including the taxi incident, the Reading incident, etc., they've all been self-initiated terrorists have all been responsible for those. So Islamist terrorism then, Islamist terrorist groups overseas play an important role in driving the threat in the UK, clearly. It's achieved primarily by inspiring would-be attackers, i.e. SITs, through ideologies and extremist media, rather than a directed group attack. So you can see how things have evolved. If you go back to the Twin Towers situation, an awful lot of planning would have gone into those attacks, teaching people how to fly planes, etc. Explosives, all sorts of different training things that needs to go on in order for the planning of those attacks. Whereas now, an SIT could quite easily just get behind a vehicle and just drive a vehicle, as we saw in Nice a few years back, 2017, I believe, where a lot of people were killed just by the fact that their weapon of attack was the vehicle itself. So you can see how things have evolved in the world of terrorism. SITs are the most dominant CT threat to the UK. These are individuals who plan attacks independently of a terrorist network. Such attacks, as we've seen previously in the UK in the last year, have been of low sophistication, don't require much preparation, specialist skills, or access to prohibited weapons. And as I said earlier, a vehicle is often all that's needed, or a knife in itself, all of which we've all got access to in our kitchens. Nature of individuals acting alone makes identification difficult, so early identification is key. So some of the key indicators to look out for is around 3 categories: developing intent, developing capability, planning and preparing for an attack. So under developing an intent, we're looking at some concerns around whether there's a sign that there's commitment to the role, a sense that something must be done and they will be the one to do it, i.e. are people verbalizing their concerns? Are they coming out with comments that are making people think, I'm a bit concerned about what they're saying? We're looking at, is there an increasingly fixated view around grievance or a target? Around developing capabilities, we're looking at, is there concerns around developing skills and knowledge? Are they deciding on tactics? Identifying and sourcing resources, developing psychological capacity to act, and is there an interest in previous low sophistication methods that have been used by previous attackers? And then the third one, planning and preparing for an attack. We're looking at, are resources being acquired that are needed to carry out an attack or to carry out reconnaissance in preparation for the attack? I'll give you an example. We had a referral in Northampton where a young male had actually bought binoculars, rucksack, etc., camouflage gear, and he was looking at numerous MOD locations. Nothing came of it. It was an interest in it, but that behaviour in itself is of concern. And then making final preparations, i.e. tying up loose ends, signs of farewell behaviours, making threats online, etc. So these are all things that we're asking people to look out for and to refer into us if there's any concerns around individuals. Extreme right-wing terrorism, it's dynamic, new groups constantly emerging. Many of these are white supremacists which aspire to collapse Western society, incite race wars, glorify SIT attacks, etc. Often we're seeing a lot of our referrals coming through where people are praising Adolf Hitler, especially in young people. There seems to be a big interest at the moment in Adolf Hitler. We can get a referral into Prevent and we can read through it and we think, well, this isn't necessarily going to be for us. And then all of a sudden you get that added bit in where it says they are they've got a big interest in Adolf Hitler and they're following his ideology, etc. In Leicestershire, an extreme right-wing ideology is frequently observed within the Prevent arena. Analysis shows the referrals often include white supremacist, white nationalist, cultural nationalist views. Concerns are reported often feature comments, attitudes and actions, as I said, that relate to Nazism, anti-Semitism, anti-immigration and racism. Online radicalisation. This also features a large proportion of local terrorism investigations, and it's also the largest primary radical influence on individuals referred to Prevent. And as I said earlier, people have a lot of time on their, or have had a lot of time on their hands in order to use this method to develop their views. Recent activity shows an increase in young individuals within the county committing offences online, downloading or distributing terrorist material, and sometimes even attack planning, which is really concerning. Monitoring the space is always going to be problematic because it's always done behind closed doors. Extreme views are often reinforced through social media and online algorithms, and people will often self-radicalise using online materials and may radicalise others by disseminating extremist material. It's interesting to note as well that one of the things that we do is when we get a referral in where it involves online use is we carry out open source checks. So people are often quite flippant in what information they put out online, what messages they put out there, etc. So it's always a useful indicator to see whether there are actually any concerns around that individual. Key signs of online radicalisation: persistent and unsecretive online behaviour, viewing extreme websites or content, sharing hateful views or images online, often quite happy to put it out there, often quite happy to tell people about what their views are, quite happy to intimidate other people, involvement in suspicious online groups or chat rooms, and the use of the dark web. And often they'll use hateful speech that indicates that they have been brainwashed or radicalised in some way, shape or form. So the method of making referrals into Prevent continues to be via the National Referral Form, which is accessible via the police website, on the internet, the Force website. You can make a referral. You can also, I'll just draw your attention to a website called the Act Early website. So it's www.actearly.co.uk. This is like a one-stop shop for anything to do with radicalisation, extremism, etc. And it is also a way that you can refer into Prevent should you have any concerns about individuals. I'll just also add as well that we also look at locations. So if anyone's, and by location, I'll say, for example, if there's an area in Leicester or Leicestershire that's been prone to having like racist graffiti, which potentially may lead down to some sort of extreme right-wing views, then we'll look at that as well. And we'll support frontline officers when dealing with offences. Referrals into Leicester Prevent have decreased by 19% on the previous year, and we think that is due to the fact that we've had a lot of restrictions around COVID-19, the lockdowns, etc. But they are increasing. Education provided the majority of the referrals, 38% in total, with police and healthcare providers making the second highest amount. Despite long periods of school closures, referrals from education increased by 11% on the previous reporting period, and this is reflected in the highest number of referrals coming in between the age brackets of 12 to 16 years, and the ideologies that we're looking at within that age bracket is extreme Islamist, extreme right-wing and school massacre ideologies being prevalent. School massacre being a big thing at the moment, especially and a lot of mental health issues around a lot of our referrals that come in. I'll just reassure people that if we get a referral in that isn't necessarily for Prevent, if there's any opportunity to signpost on or to make safeguarding referrals, then that will always be done. We won't just close a referral knowing that there's outstanding referrals to be done, onward referrals, should I say, around vulnerability and mental health issues. We're supported by the Vulnerability Support Hub, which is they look at unmet mental health needs on our referrals. So they provide fantastic advice around what sort of direction we should be taking that referral in, what sort of help is actually needed in order to deal with the cause of that person's problems, rather than just glossing over it. Islamist Prevent referrals have declined by 11% on the previous year, and within Leicestershire, the Islamist terrorism and extreme right-wing referrals remain comparable. The highest number of referrals were received from Leicester City, and that's followed by Hinckley and Bosworth and then Charnwood. The contact number for Leicester Prevent, the office, is Leicester 0116 248 6770. That's a number that can be called, and we're happy to take calls to offer advice, etc. And as I say, the national referral form can be found on the police website. Before I finish off, I just want to put a slide on. If you just bear with me 2 seconds, I thought it would be quite useful for people to see a breakdown of where the referrals are actually coming across the county. It just means sharing my screen. I don't know if this is going to work because I was struggling with it earlier, so just bear with me. Can you see that? If someone could just shout out. Yep, that's fine. So this screen just gives you a breakdown by area of where the referrals are. As you can see, the majority being the city in the middle. And then we've got Hinckley and Bosworth, where we've had 15 referrals, followed by Charnwood, Blaby, and then more or less on the same scale, you've got North West Leicestershire, Melton, Rutland and Harborough. So that's the update from incorporating from Prevent, incorporating the CTLP. I'll just stop sharing, go back onto the screen. Does anybody have any questions I want to ask?
Thanks, Gary. That'd be is that sort of that map you've just put up, is that pretty standard or has it changed much?
No, it's pretty standard, yeah. We've always had the majority of our referrals in the city centre, and then a split across the board with regards to the different areas in the county.
I suppose, is there anything further that the partnership can do to help promote this a bit more within their sort of local areas, or are we pretty much doing what we can at the moment?
I was having a think about that, but I mean, the thing that's evolving all the time for us is our engagement opportunities. Now, clearly, we have a lot of different communities in Leicester, and we're having to provide reassurance to various different communities around their perception of Prevent and what help Prevent can actually be to individuals. So there's always a reluctance in some communities to refer in. So what I'd say was that if there's any opportunities for us to provide an input, then we're more than happy to do that. If you've got organisations that you're aware of that you think may be having these vulnerable people coming through, then it's always good to provide or to give the workers, if you like, the tools and the knowledge in order to make a referral, to have the confidence to make the referral. So we're quite happy to provide an input around what Prevent is about, how to make a referral, what the warning signs are, etc., things to look out for. Inputs can last anything between half an hour to an hour. So it's not a lot, and we can tie it into team meetings, etc. So
I was just thinking whether it's something partners take back. Obviously, it might already be happening, but I suppose just going back to what I said before about the fire visits and stuff like that, if one partner's going into someone's property and suspects something, are they trained enough now to pick up those signs and to do that referral, or is there more work that we need to do?
There's always more work that needs to be done. I mean, if anyone knows of any weaknesses in the system, I mean, there's always statutory training. Organisations have a responsibility to train. Yeah. Certain organisations have a responsibility to train people on extremism, radicalisation, and Prevent. There's always going to be weaknesses. So if there is any opportunities, then we're more than happy to support with that. We're not trainers, but what we can do is support the training of individuals.
Yeah, I suppose it's down to all our individual partners on this call, really, just to go back to their own organisation and just check that everyone that's doing sort of home visits and stuff like that are aware of it and how to do it. A couple of questions.
A lot of people. Sorry, Chair. I was just going to add to that. I'll give you an example. I took a phone call from a school a couple of weeks back, and they gave me a scenario. They were worried about an individual. It was a young child, and at the end of it, it was, I hope you don't think I'm being racist by reporting this. And I think that says it all. For a lot of people worry around that, and we need to provide that reassurance and give that person the tools to actually confidently make that referral into us.
Yeah. Okay. David.
Fine. Yeah, interesting about the graffiti. Over the last few weeks in Melton, I think we've had a couple of incidents where swastikas have been put on the church, and then yesterday I came across the N-word spray painted as well in a pretty close proximity where the stickers were done as well. So I wonder if there's some work with the local community, like local youth around there, that could be done maybe with Prevent. I think that might be worthwhile if we can tap into something with you guys.
Yeah, by all means. Did you get the number? If you ring the office,
yeah, I've got the number.
Yeah, please give us a call. We'll take it as a referral, and then we can get some work put in place. It may be that we work with other agencies to do that, but yeah, definitely.
Brilliant, thank you.
That's exactly the sort of location that we would be looking at to support with.
Yeah.
Okay. Gadget.
Thank you. Just to let everybody know that the partnership process we've got set up across the county is that Edwina Grant from Hinckley and Bosworth Borough Council is the district lead for Prevent and represents the districts and boroughs, and then the community safety team at Leicestershire County Council kind of has that coordination and overview at the moment, and that relationship's working really well with Andy and with Ian, who's coming in a minute. At the moment as well, just to reassure you, we are looking at the links between hate and prevent. So the work that David's just talked about there, we're currently looking at reviewing the hate awareness packages that are going into secondary and primary schools. So that all links into this. When we look at graffiti, you know, in terms of we don't know where it's come from. It might be children, it might be extreme right wing, but we are doing a lot of work in the hate space as well, and there are clearly links between the two.
Okay, thanks, Gurjit.
Chair, could I just ask just very quick, just want to clarify, make sure, Gurjit, referral wise, I've just obviously tried to promote the national referral form. I take it you're happy for things to come directly to us. You don't want it to go through to
absolutely, Edwina. Yeah, okay. That's what we do anyway, Andy.
Yeah, I just want to double check Edwina didn't want them first. We'd always notify Edwina anyway. So.
But it is fascinating that where Edwina is the district lead, that the numbers in Hinckley are higher. So it just shows that promotion and that comms does work. So we'll be looking at doing more of that in the other districts and boroughs.
And it's a real strong communication network that we've got, with Edwina being the front of it, really. So,
yeah. Okay. Aisha. You're still on mute.
Sorry, I thought I'd unmuted. Apologies if you've covered this already, as I did have to dip out during the presentation, but I just wanted to kind of flip it around a little bit around proactive work of Prevent. I know Prevent is all about proactivity anyway, but just going on a sort of the recent thing that's been in the news about the young girl that was strip searched, etc. I did get the tail end of what you were talking about around triggers that are identified through people searching on websites, etc. But just a sort of system-wide approach, is there anything that the partnership does in terms of offering support to victims who, as a result of being sort of having that kind of experience, that fosters that mistrust of police and institutional organisations, because that can be then a lead on to them trying to find support elsewhere, if that makes sense. So it's about being proactive to offer support to those victims that may look for support elsewhere and then become radicalised.
Okay, so are you saying, when you say victims, you mean the victim of a crime and they've had a negative?
So victims of institutional sort of treatment, I guess, that so if I and I am only using this as an example, if I give that recent example of the young girl in Derbyshire, for example, that was strip searched by the police, I don't know if anyone has seen it, but it did make it into the news. And I say, I guess if appropriate support is not issued to that family or the girl on a proactive basis, could it foster, it fosters that mistrust of institution, which makes our jobs a lot harder, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, okay, so from our point of view, we have a team of contact officers, which are, when in that sort of situation, when there's potentially a negative thing happen to a family. I mean, I'll give you an example. If somebody is accused of a terrorist offence, it's life-changing, not only for them, but it's also life-changing for the family as well, and the effect it has on them. And like you were saying, Aisha, that you know the effect is, you know, potentially going forward they'll have a negative view of the police. So a contact officer role is somebody that's impartial, and it's they're the officers that go in and actually provide support to family members in order to get them through the situation, if you like. So we're not involved with the investigation as such. We're there to facilitate communication, to offer reassurance, and to provide support going forward. Because if one person in the family has got themselves into trouble, that's not everybody in the family, and yet the knock-on effect, the ripple effect, is massive. So yeah, there are things set up where support's in place. I'm not sure whether I'm hitting the nail on the head with the scenario that you've provided me, but from our point of view, we are able to, at pretty short notice, we are able to almost change into a fully supportive role where we go in, and although there's police in the location as well, and they are, you know, searching or they've carried out arrests and stuff, we're not there to be part of that. We're in the prevent side of it. We're there to provide support.
Thank you.
Okay, Anita.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to add on what Gurjit also said, is that we also have the Prevent standalone page where referrals can be made, and also the 2 safeguarding boards that we have, which is the adults and children, is also linked in there. And we work quite closely with the police and Sean previously when he was the Prevent coordinator. And on the back of what Gurjit said, the work linking with hate and Prevent, we are at the moment through the strategic hate group looking at, you know, how can we look at resources within primary and secondary, and we have acknowledged that through the PHSE lesson planning the schools do have, we're looking to sort of pull together an overview of different materials that's already out there rather than reinvent the wheel. And I'm going to link up with the appropriate colleagues within our department to ensure that the messages get out to heads of schools and safeguarding leads. So Andy, we can be in touch on that as well. And also, and I know Ian will probably raise this, that we have been long waiting the Home Office refresh training on Prevent and the RAP as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Anita.
Chair.
There's another. Yeah, did you want to come back, Andy? Yeah, go
no,
ahead.
I was just going to say, I've just noticed another hand up, but before we go to the question, there's a short update as well about the current Ukraine situation. I don't know whether you want to...
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, it was just to say that there's no current overarching threat to in the UK at the moment. Any future threat is likely to be around some sort of cyber attack theme. There's no current links to terrorism, no known prescribed groups, organisations, etc. involved UK-wise. Regarding travel, obviously the official advice is that, for people not to go over there. There's no current plans to prosecute anyone who does travel to Ukraine. However, there may be clear safeguarding issues if people take families over there with regards to children, etc. Prevent-wise in Leicester, sorry, not just Leicester, in the East Mids region, we've had 3 referrals recently involving concerns around a perceived extreme ideology, which in actual fact there isn't. But the themes are that this involves an evacuee, an intended traveller, and then the third one is that they thought somebody was being galvanised into what was happening and you know, taking it seriously, etc., and potentially intending to travel over there. So we would, although we're not dealing with anything, there's no extreme ideology present there, we would obviously make sure that any vulnerability is dealt with, any safeguarding opportunities are referred on. So
thank you. Just a quick comment there from David Pete about any reports of the Z symbol appearing.
No, that's interesting to see how that pans out, whether that becomes almost like a symbol that we all associate with it. But no, nothing particularly regarding that. I think there was somebody else had the hand up, but I think it's gone now. Maybe that was.
I think that was Anita. She's already asked questions. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you for the time.
Okay, thanks for coming. Thank you for all that information. I think that leads on really to our next item, which is the Regional Prevent Advisor. Ian, over to you.
Yeah, hi, morning, Chair. Thanks very much. I'll just share my screen. It's really by way of introduction to myself. Just bear with me while I find the right one.
Yeah, that's on our screen. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get the slideshow from the beginning. Okay. Yeah, thanks for the time this morning. Really, really pleased to come and join you. And certainly, just really by way of introduction to myself and my role. So as it says on the slide, I'm the Regional Prevent Advisor. I work for Homeland Security at the Home Office. I've been in post now since August and been working really closely with Gurjit and Anita and Edwina in Leicestershire. And I'd just like to add, Chair, that I'm really pleased and it's been really nice, the sort of welcome and the level of engagement I've had from Leicestershire. So I think, that's a really positive thing. There's a few bits I'm going to touch on that sort of Andy's touched on and other sort of questions really. And I guess it sort of boils down to what the Home Office role in this sort of space is. And I wanted to start with this slide, and the observant of you will notice that this isn't actually in the slide set that I circulated. I've just added it in this morning while thinking about what I wanted to say. And also following on from a visit I did yesterday to Derbyshire County Council. So I think it's just important to remind people on this call that actually the prevent duty is a statutory responsibility on all specified authorities, which includes obviously all district and borough councils, which I'm sure you're well aware of, and that is to have due regard to the need to prevent people being drawn into terrorism. And I guess what that means sort of locally is, I think the partnership that you have with in LLR with Leicester City Council, the St Philip's Centre, and obviously Rutland is a really positive thing, and I certainly wouldn't want to move anywhere, move away from that at all. But I do think it's worth reflecting that actually that doesn't negate each district and borough council's responsibilities under the duty to ensure that they are meeting the 10 benchmarks of the duty, and that's something that I'm speaking to Gurjit and Anita around and making sure that's happening. And I'm not saying it's not; it's just a thought really. So I just wanted to touch really on what my role is. So, as I said, I came into post in August. I'm one of 13 regional advisors covering the whole of England and Wales. And I work very closely alongside 3 channel quality assurance officers that also work within Homeland Security within our team. And really our role and remit is to provide support to unfunded local authorities. And I think the second bit of that sentence is really important, and prevent partners regionally. So yes, the majority of my work by definition almost is going to be with local authorities because they tend to take the lead on a lot of prevent activity. But actually I'm also here to support other prevent partners within the partnership as well. And then the second bracket, it says there temporarily, it's no longer temporary, but I'm also account manager for the funded areas in the East Midlands. So I've taken over from Will Bolday as account manager for Leicester, the team at the St Philip's Centre and the City Council, and also Derby City Council and Nottingham City Council. The next 3 slides are fairly obvious. So I'm the dedicated point of contact for prevention in the Home Office for everybody. That seems to be working really well. Edwina, Anita, Gurjit contact me regularly about bits and pieces, and we've got that dialogue going, which is really helpful and useful. And we're trying to, as the Home Office, push out far more information to the unfunded areas. I suppose it's that last bullet point on there about closing the gap between funded and unfunded areas. Our role came into being really following sort of recognition by our seniors in the Home Office that we provide a huge amount of support to the 42 funded local authority areas across the country, and actually nothing beyond that. So this is an attempt by us to close some of that gap and actually provide that ongoing daily, weekly, monthly support and advice and resource to ensure that all sort of local authorities right down to that district and borough level are able to deliver their prevent duty. I think the other 2 bullet points are sort of left to last because I think they're quite important. One is around building an understanding of prevent, threat and risk across the East Midlands. And I guess there's some questions maybe for the people on this call about what that actually means and what that might look like. I've been tasked with developing a regional prevent improvement plan from a partnership perspective. So looking at what themes occur across all of the 5 council areas in the East Midlands within the East Midlands CTP region, and looking at maybe where there's some common themes and sort of threads and sharing of good practice, and trying to identify where we can work together to improve and close some of those gaps. I think it's also about how we use the data better. I've had some quite interesting conversations over the last few weeks with regional partners about their understanding of threat and risk across the East Midlands. So as an example, we obviously have all the PCM data, the referral data that the police have, but also within Homeland Security analysis and insight, we do a lot of analysis of threat and risk, which informs the prioritisation process, but we sort of don't tend to do very much with that. And I think there's a bit of a gap there. So, for example, I can say to you, and we're not going to share the rankings, but we rank every local authority, all 331 local authorities in the country, on a whole range of data sets which are weighted according to the importance. So it includes the security service data, the pursue investigation data, subjects of interest data, all the data that CT policing have, as well as a lot of data sets that local authorities keep around hate crime, indices of deprivation, unemployment, migration, all of those types of things all go into a big pot, and we come out with a figure and as scientifically as we can to sort of rank the CT threat in all the local authorities. And I think there must be something we can do to better understand that. I mean, what I will say is locally, it's quite an anomaly because Leicester City Council is one of the highest ranked areas in the country. Leicestershire County Council area is pretty low risk across all the district councils, and actually probably as a county council area the lowest risk in the East Midlands. So there's a big sort of difference there between what we see in the city and what we see in the county. And then the other bullet point I wanted to touch on was the idea of quality assurance of prevent delivery locally and regionally. So I think I'm coming to the county council next week to sit down with Anita and Gurjit and talk through and really benchmark where we see prevent delivery in Leicestershire. Not for the benefit of you guys, really, not us. So it's about sort of going through what's been done well, and there's lots of stuff being done well, and maybe identifying some areas that would be sort of room for development, and maybe room to sort of share some of the good practice that you do in Leicestershire, and also learn from some of the good practice that I see in other council areas. So I think that's a really good opportunity as well. I'll skip over this slide. It's just the sort of who am I, because I don't like being a face on a screen that nobody's ever met before. And I guess it's the credibility to do this job, and you know, what's my experience. So I was a police officer for 30 years. I retired in 2017. At the time I was a neighbourhood inspector in Sheffield, so I've got a community background. For the last 4 years I've worked for Rotherham Council as counter-extremism coordinator, so sort of background in CE work and community work, the same role that Ben Smith did in Leicester, if you know Ben. And the bottom two pictures are really what I do in my spare time. So it's about that I'm not just a cop or an ex-council employee and then work for the Home Office. Most of this I've touched on. So I guess the last slide is just really to show that I do understand the challenge of working in an unfunded local authority area. I did that in quite Rotherham Council is quite a difficult borough council area to work in this sort of space. So I do get some of those challenges in working with a lack of resource. So I guess it's about how can I support the county council and where can I add value. It's about developing that understanding of threat and risk, as I've just said, and then developing a regional improvement plan and working collaboratively with yourselves in Leicestershire and also all the other 9 local authorities around the East Midlands. I try to link in wherever I can with the prevent steering groups, happy to attend any meetings where you may want a Home Office input, speaking to SLT, member briefings, etc., etc. And again, I've just put a slide down about community engagement, and I've not yet had this conversation in any detail with Gurjit or the team, so I don't know where Leicestershire is in terms of prevent community engagement. But again, it's something we have a comms and community engagement team within our team at the Home Office, and we're quite happy to support some of that work if that's the way you'd like to go. I'm sort of rushing through this because I'm mindful of time. We've set up an East Midlands Prevent network for the first time. It met this week, earlier this week, virtually. The next meeting is going to be in Lincoln in May. We're going to meet quarterly, led by the Home Office, but I'm really keen that this meets the needs of local practitioners. We've got all the regional partners involved, Andy and the team from CTP East Midlands, our analysts, and we're looking at bringing in sort of thematic academic presentations, policy updates, developments, things that are happening from our world in the Home Office and the policy as a policy owners, and most importantly, I think, around sharing good practice and working together. I think the first network meeting, Gurjit raised a really good point about how can we develop work across different local authority areas and learn from each other, and I think this provides a really good opportunity to do that. So that's in its early stages. I think I've got 2 more slides, so I just wanted to give a few Home Office updates whilst I'm here and take the opportunity. So the independent review of Prevent seems like, certainly in my world, it seems like the noose that's been around our neck for about the last 6 or 7 months. It was due to report initially, this is the Lord Shawcross report, it was due to report initially back in September, October time to the Home Office. We still haven't had the report. We've had notification again this month that he's asked for another month's delay. So we're, in realistic terms, the report will come to the Home Secretary probably, well, it's probably, I've been saying probably now for about 4 months, but hopefully by the end of April. We're then going to be really pushed to turn that around and get a government response before Parliament, before the summer recess. So optimistically, it may be put the sort of the report and the government response to the report might be published in July at the absolute earliest, but it's probably more likely to be September. And I'm touching wood very strongly while I'm saying that, because I don't have a great deal of confidence that we'll even get it by the end of April. But I think that will set the, it'd be interesting to see what's in that. And genuinely, we haven't had any steer as to what might be included. So it'll be interesting to see what is included. But that's obviously going to set the framework for Prevent delivery over the next 3 years. We've just had the spending review. We've now got a 3-year spending, 3-year funding agreed for the Home Office. So actually, we're on a better footing in terms of the next 3 years, and it's just that question of what direction of travel we're having in terms of delivery. The second point on there, we've agreed for the first time a pot of funding for regional projects. So I think that probably feeds into that comment that Aisha made earlier, and talking about individuals impacted by Prevent intervention in a negative way, and also overcoming some of those perceptions and negative views of Prevent. There's a lot of project work in the funded areas that goes on in that space. It's more, I guess it's more of a partnership response and a Home Office response than it is a CT policing response. But I think there are opportunities in there to do some of that work if it's necessary on a sort of case by case basis, I guess. But what we're looking to do is, again, that's that point in the first slide about closing the gap and creating opportunities for us to focus some of the delivery outside of the 42 priority areas on a risk basis, and I guess that's where the local risk assessments and local delivery plans come in to provide that evidence basis to, as the regional advisor, I'm going to be responsible for managing those project bids from all 5 counties. Where in the East Midlands do I want to prioritise a little bit of that pot of money that I'm going to get? Am I going to deliver it in Mansfield or Leicestershire or somewhere in Derbyshire or Lincolnshire or wherever? We've already spoken about the QA process. I've put on their incident response. Should we ever have an incident in the region, then I would be the sort of go-to person from a Home Office point of view in terms of that initial response for the senior people within the local authority, and to get into contact with the right people in the Home Office. The last 3 points on there, I'm not going to touch on in great detail. We've set up a HSAI, Homeland Security Analysis and Insight. We like acronyms. The Home Office is worse for acronyms than the police were, surprisingly. So our analysts now hold a forum every 6 weeks, and I know that Anita came to the last one, and there's an open invite to the staff from the county council. It's around sharing the research that's been delivered by our analysts with the wider partnership, and obviously finding a bit of a steer on what's going on in communities around the country. I'm going to gloss over the anti-vax protest because I think that's probably an old issue now. And I think Andy's touched on the Ukraine crisis. I mean, all I'd say around the Ukraine crisis, obviously from a Home Office point of view, it's taken a huge amount of our bandwidth in terms of resourcing the crisis response, looking at, huge issues around the Ukraine refugee issue and all of those sorts of things. But I think I'd reiterate Andy's point that actually, in terms of a CT risk at the moment, we're not seeing massive concerns. We are seeing a few referrals, as we've said, and some narratives playing out in communities around the difference between the sort of response to Ukraine in terms of foreign travel and the response to the crisis in Syria, for example. And I think I'm probably near the end there. So the questions just to people on the call is around where I can add value. I'm here. Please do use me. My contact details are on the document that's been circulated. I guess there's a question around how do we support districts and borough councils as a central government agency. It's quite difficult to do that. I think you're quite strong in that situation in Leicestershire with the work that Edwina does. And I guess what you would like to see from this sort of developing East Midlands Prevent network, and what you'd like to see from me, really. My contact details are on there, and I'll hopefully stop sharing if I can work out how to do it. Thank you. I hope that's useful.
Thanks, Ian. Many thanks for coming and introducing yourself. Yeah. Any questions from anyone? I think it's a bit for us to digest there. Maybe when you next come here, we might have a few more questions for you, but especially if that review comes out as well. I think we're all waiting for that, aren't we, to see what happens and what we need to do.
Yeah. I think my thoughts at the moment are that we're going to devote the East Midlands Prevent Network meeting in September to workshopping sort of the review outcomes and what that means, both locally in Leicestershire, I guess, and regionally, and what the sort of delivery landscape is going to look like, because I don't think there's likely to be some changes, I guess, but we don't know what they are.
Okay, probably good for you to come back then at that point once you've got a bit more flavour of what we're going to be doing regionally, and just here for Leicestershire as well, following the review. It'd be good to come back and share that with colleagues here.
Yeah, no problem. More than happy to.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Ian from anyone? No, okay, lovely. We'll move on then to our final item, which is the Glenparva prison update. I can see Raj is here. Is it you taking it?
It certainly is. Hello, good morning, everybody. Well, can you hear me okay?
Yeah,
I'm actually in the office today. So yeah, I appreciate we are really out of time. So just very, very quick flyby. The new prison at Glenparva, you've probably read already, is now called HMP Foss Way. We are going to be obviously trying to revert to calling it HMP Foss Way as much as we possibly can. But of course, Glenparva obviously sticks, but I think the sooner the better, so that would be really good. Serco have been appointed as the operator, so this is obviously under a 10-year contract. Serco have been to site, they were there last week, and they've actually had a look around the site, but obviously it's early days at the moment, so they're just really getting their feet under the table. A couple of key things is the fact that hopefully through the newsletter you've actually seen that they've done an incredible job in their 1.2 million hours, so they are doing a celebratory event on site, which is obviously for the contractors, but we do have COVID rife on site now. So one of the key messages really that I want to give you today is that I had to make a decision yesterday actually to postpone all visits to site now, with a review taking place on the 11th of, week commencing the 11th of April. we obviously preserving the integrity of the programme is obviously the most important thing for us at the moment. So we've actually been cancelling all visits. Hope you understand, because it would have been great to have come to you today to have actually said, you know, hey, come along. Our newsletter also went out. Obviously, these things are written well in advance to actually say that if people were interested in coming along for a visit, again, really going to be very happy and actually gathering names, etc., and contacting people when the time comes. I don't think I've got any more time for anything, but perhaps any urgent questions. Les, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, go ahead, Les.
Morning, Raj. It's not a question at all. It is a huge commendation. You know what this is about, Raj. So I actually came across a resident, young adult in my area with additional needs, slipped through the system. Quick call to Raj, quick intro to the construction team on site, and their response was instant.
Pleasure. No problem at all. I think where we can, obviously, I mean, it's really important that we make the right contribution to the local community in any way. So really grateful for any feedback. If you think we should be doing more in any particular area, again, please do just pick up the phone. But it'd be great to particularly host maybe one of your meetings on site once this all calms down. But yeah, at the moment, unfortunately, that's where we are. But yeah, all good and all running to programme at present.
So I don't know what the end result will be. What the commendation is, the response from the Lend-Lease team on site was instantaneous. Yes, let's have a chat. Let's see if we can help. And that conversation has taken place, and I've now left the family with the team to see if there is some mileage. But no, thank you, Raj. It was brilliant.
No problem.
Excellent. Yeah, I suppose I'm really sad to hear on there about the loss of one of your colleagues in there, Guy Livingston, on site. So really sorry to hear that, and please pass on our condolences. I think the name for the prison is really good. When I saw it in the newspaper, I thought, yeah, that's really good. So yeah, no, I think it's really positive what's happening there, and yeah, no, it'd be good to come out and see you when we can. So hopefully soon. We keep saying that, don't we? But hopefully soon we can come out and have a look around. So thanks for the newsletter. It's really good to keep receiving those, see how we're going. Any other questions from anyone else about the prison? Foss Way, I should try and remember to call it that. Not Glenparva anymore.
Let's try. But yeah, okay. It won't happen. Thank you all.
Many thanks for coming. I feel like we're always rushing you at the end, but we've had your newsletter. So thank you for popping in. Always good to see you anyway, even if just for a few minutes.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, on to item 16. Any other business from anyone? I've got nothing else to raise. And then item 7 is our meeting of the next meeting is on Friday, the 17th of June at 10 a.m. So I look forward to seeing you all then. Thank you for your time this morning. I know it's been a long morning, but I think the way we've set these 2 meetings up seems to work when we've got all the partners that, you know, here for the same day. So I think we'll stick with it. I know it's quite a long meeting, but thank you very much for sticking with us, and I'll see you all soon.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Bye-bye.
Bye.